Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel for another video. In today's video, I'm doing a two-part series where I'm going to do like a client transformation. This is my sister, so y'all say hey. I made her wig and then I did her makeup and installed the wig on part 2. So if you're interested in seeing how I got the look, then continue watching. First things first, I'm spraying down the frontal to get all the baby hair out of the way. So I'm just combing it back and then I'm gonna flip it to where the lace side is up so that we can bleach the knots. So I'm gonna use my L'Oreal Quick Blue powder and my 30 volume developer that I bought from Sally's. And I'm gonna mix that into the powder by the capful so that I can make sure I get the right consistency for my bleach mixture. You don't want this too thin. It will seep through and bleach all your knots and you will have hot roots, and that'll be even more correction you have to do. And you don't want it too thick to where it's balled up and like in little balls because the powder is not fully saturated. So once I've gotten that mixed, I just went in and I essentially like painted it on the knots. I pressed it just a little bit, but you don't want to press too hard. So you want to kind of have a light hand when you do this. And you want to make sure that you don't get too much on the hair strands like I'm doing. So what I'm doing now is taking a paper towel that is a little bit wet with water. And I'm just going in and getting off the excess bleach. And this is how it should look. Okay, so I've let that mixture sit on my frontal for about 15 minutes. And I suggest that you just check the frontal every 5 minutes or so to see how it's lifting, because everybody's hair lifts differently. There's different factors that will affect how fast it processes. Once it's blonde, it's time to wash it out. I wash with purple shampoo to help with the brassiness. And then I coat the rest of the hair on the frontal with a silicone mix to help recondition it. Also on the lace to help with the knots. And then I'm going to move on to sewing my bundles together. And as you can see, I'm using my sewing machine. I'm showing you how I'm lining them up because this is how I'm going to sew the bundles together using a zigzag pattern on the machine. Okay, so if this is your first time using a sewing machine, I suggest that you first start by sewing on some fabric to make sure that you can sew in a straight line, because y'all, when I tell y'all I had never used a sewing machine prior to this, like I had no idea how to work the thing. So my sister had to help me learn how to thread my needle and all that. And there are instructions that come with your sewing machine, but just spend some time first practicing on just a piece of fabric. Honestly, I used a t-shirt and I sewed in a straight line until I got it together. And then once I was good with that, I went ahead and put my wefts under there and I was able to sew my bundles together. So another thing I'm going to suggest is that you maybe use synthetic hair first to learn how to make the wig, because there's a way you have to hold the cap when you're sewing your bundles on so that you don't shrink the cap completely. And then, you know, there's other factors that come into making a sewing machine wig that, you know, you just have to experience by practicing. So all I'm doing here is just showing you how I am sewing the bundles together. I am using both hands because I'm not on a steady surface. I'm using a little collapsible table and it is bouncing like crazy. So I'm having to hold my wefts as steady as I can to make sure that it goes through the machine in a proper manner. So for the end of your weft, all you need to do is just hit the machine in reverse a few times so that way you can make sure the end is super flat, and then you're just going to pull it through to go ahead and cut the excess thread. So this is what your weft should look like. So you went from 2 wefts to 1 big weft, and this is going to help when you're sewing your hair onto the cap. So the way I keep them separated is just take the rubber band off that I had when they were rolled up, and I just save that with the card that it came with, so that way I know exactly which bundle it is for when I start sewing on the wig cap. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I go in and fix any mistakes if I do make some. So you can see right here that I didn't fully get the thread through both of those wefts. So I'm just going to go in by placing it right back under the foot of the sewing machine and just going back and forth over that little section until it is properly sewed together. Okay, so that's our 22-inch bundle. I'm gonna sew the 24 off camera, and then I'm going to wash the frontal out before we start prepping for the wig. So now it's time to make our grid lines on our wig cap. I am using a 22-inch head. My model's head is a 21-inch, but I always go like up a size, up half a size if I do have that available. So that way it'll give me a little wiggle room for when the cap shrinks a bit. Because I'm not 100% perfect at making these wigs, but like I can do a little something. So here I'm showing you where to place the cap on the actual wig head. There is a little point in the head that represents like the nape of the neck on a real person. So you want to take the end of that cap where it's into a V and line it up with the point. And then there's two lines on the front of the cap that you're going to line up with the middle of the wig head. There is a stitch that goes straight down the middle to the back of the head, and you'll see that here, and you want to make sure that's right in the middle, and that's how you properly get the cap onto your wig head. So once you have that, I'm going to first size my frontal so I can have a space where I know to not sew any wefts. This is the frontal all washed out. I usually start by marking off where I estimate the ear tabs are going to be, and it's not very much of the frontal, but you want to just take that, and that kind of gives you a little wiggle room, because when you place the frontal on the cap, you want to make sure that the back of the frontal is flush with the cap. That's the most important thing for your wig to fit properly. So what you're going to do is I'm placing the frontal on, as you can see, and I'm just going to pull it a little bit ahead of the cap, maybe like 1 to 2 inches before or in front of the cap, and I'm going to place it down with some pins. All right, so you can see I'm putting this on crooked. You do not want to do that, okay? Because your wig will be messed up. So take your time, appropriately put the frontal on the canvas block, and then you want to secure that down. I did go back in and fix it positioning wise, so where it was lined up where the middle and the middle of the frontal line up, and then you can see where I made those silver markings. That's the part that's going to be cut off the frontal. You can either cut it off now, or you can cut it off when you size the wig on your model's head. But where the thick band on the frontal ends is where you want to pin that to the cap, okay? And this is what I mean by keeping the frontal flush with your cap. The front will be bumpy. That's okay, as long as the back is straight down. Okay, so once I've relined where my frontal will go, I will start with my grid lines on the cap. The first couple of lines I'm going to do are going to be in like a little semicircle, half circle, crescent, whatever you want to refer to it as. That's just so that I am making sure that my cap will still have a little bit of stretch when I do start sewing on the bundles. And then you want to make sure they're spaced. I know this looks like they're going to be very far, but as you sew on the cap, it will shrink if you are using a zigzag pattern. If you know how to sew and you can use a different pattern, then you should be fine to space them a little bit closer. But that's also another reason why you sewed your bundles together, so that you would have enough space to place all the bundles on the wig cap. Okay, so what you see me doing is first placing all my lines. I'm going to start going ear to ear until I get to about the temple region, and then I'll go straight across the wig cap. Okay, as you can see in this clip, I'm showing you exactly how stretchy this cap is, which is why I either like using this one or the one with the pull string at the back, which I didn't have any more of those, so this is what I use for the video. I like the mesh dome cap, just so it has a little bit of room to stretch as needed. You're going to sit the weft and the cap directly under the foot of the sewing machine, and you're going to use those grid lines as markings of where you sew your weft. Okay, once you've gotten it properly lined up, you're going to go ahead and drop the foot or the plate onto the wefting cap. And then I'm going to drop my needle in so that way I can begin to sew everything together. I tend to start off pretty slow in the beginning, and then as I start getting my rhythm, I'll start to thread everything or push everything through the sewing machine a little bit quicker. Okay, so once you've gotten to the end of the cap and the weft, you want to make sure that you hit it in reverse a few times just to make sure everything's fully sewn together. And then you're going to take that thread and snip it with your scissors. So once the thread is cut, I'll go in and cut off the weft to move on to the next one. So I do cut my wefts, so you can anticipate that your wig will have a little bit of shedding. But for me, this is how I get the flattest install I can. And then I will move on to the next portion of the wig. So I'm just doing the same exact thing. Just remember that you don't want to pull or overstretch your cap because it would have the exact opposite effect. Because you're using a zigzag pattern on your sewing machine, it's going to gather more of the cap together, which is another reason why you are making your grid lines so far apart on the wig. So remember, keep it taut, not tight. Don't overstretch, and then just kind of let the sewing machine take in the fabric with the weft, and it should go kind of seamlessly. Okay, so I'm going to show you that my cap still has a good stretch to it. So you can see that by just holding the cap kind of sturdy and taut underneath the foot of the sewing machine, it keeps the same size. So just remember, you can go back and check your work by putting it on the canvas block to make sure it's the same size, or stretching it to your client's head if you are making this wig for someone else. Okay, so now that we're at the top of the wig, I'm going to show you how I sew on the frontal. I do a traditional stitch. So I just take that part or that area that I had marked out previously, taking some regular thread and a curved needle, and I am going to just sew the frontal on. Okay, so in this clip up here, I wanted you to see that I am sewing my frontal through and to that top weft that I have on the wig. This will make it very easy for you to exchange your frontal. If it does start to say like bald or get old, you could easily clip each one of those little knots and switch out your frontal. Here I'm just gathering the wig to show you exactly how thick it is. I did have quite a bit of weft left over, so I wanted to make sure that I sewed that into the wig to make sure she had an extra full wig, so you know you could use all your bundles. So I'm just going to go in, and in between some of those stitch lines, I'm going to go in and add some tracks. Okay, so here's the partially finished unit. I'm going to show you the inside of the construction. You can kind of see where I stitched a few extra tracks. And then I'm going to go in and snip away the excess cap that's laying underneath the frontal. Okay, once I've clipped off the excess cap, I am going to go in with a comb and add that to the back of the wig just for added security at the nape. I also do sew in an elastic band in most of my units. And then I'm going to get into styling, where I'm going to use my Garnier Sleek and Shine Serum, and then I'm going to lightly go in with my Conair flat iron to get rid of a majority of that wave pattern. To further style the wig, we're going to go in and add some loose curls. I'm using my GVP curling wand. Y'all, this is my most loved tool, I think, when it comes to like making a wig. She wanted a loose curl wig, like with the side part, with the deep side part. So part 2 of this video will be the installation of me putting her wig on. But we're just going to go in and add some curls. Okay, and this will conclude part 1 of my how to make a wig tutorial. Stay tuned for the beat and the wig installation, and I will see you all on the next one.